In my last video, I covered primitive data types in JavaScript. In this video, I'll cover reference types. So what even are reference types? Technically, any variable that is not one of the primitive types will be a reference type, so we don't get a nice short list like we did with the primitive types. There are only 7 primitive types, while the list of reference types goes on, so I couldn't possibly cover them all in one video. But just like primitive types have a big 3, reference types have a big 3 most common types, and for this video we'll focus on those. And then I will briefly describe the difference between primitive and reference types. An object is a collection of properties where each property is defined as a key value pair. Objects can be used to store and organize data and can contain objects, arrays, and functions. This object describes the white sports car in the photo. So what does that look like in code? Let's write that object. Sports car equals, we'll use curly braces, and then we'll start adding the key pair properties of this. So we'll say the year, colon, and we'll use a number for this. You can have a mixture of different types, and it's separated by a comma. Year 2024, let's say make equals Honda. Let's make this a little bit more realistic towards the author of this video. And let's make the model a Odyssey. Is that how you spell it? One too many S's. How do you spell Odyssey? There we go. So there's our model. And then how can we use this? We can use this by using dot notation. So let me log the properties of this out to the console. We'll say console.log, and we'll interpolate a string. So use backticks, and then we can add these into our string with a dollar and curly braces. And we'll say sports car, not a sports car anymore, but that's okay. Year. So we'll say I drive a, and then let's add the make and the model, sports car dot make, and sports car dot model. Now let's save this and run it. And as you can see, it says, I drive a 2024 Honda Odyssey. Next up is arrays. An array is a special type of object used for storing ordered collections of values. Each value in an array is called an element, and each element has an index starting from 0. So I'll show you how to write out an array in JavaScript and then access its elements by its index. So let's say const myr equals, and then we can just put random types and values in here. We can even have arrays within arrays. So they're just separated by commas. So there we go. We have an array right there. And now I will show you what I mean by the index. So let's console.log. We'll say my r, and then we'll use brackets. And let's choose the first index, which would start at 0. And let's see what we get. And you can see I have 1 there. So let's do 4. So there you go. It's a collection of values that you can access by an index. Lastly is functions. A function in JavaScript is a block of code designed to perform a particular task. Functions are executed when they are called, and they can take parameters and return a result, or they can be used for their side effects and take action. So let's write both kinds of functions. We'll start with an arrow function. Let func1 equal, and we'll pass in some parameters. Equal sign, arrow, curly braces, and we'll say return. We'll add the parameters together, a plus b. And now we can call this and log the values by doing console.log func1, And then these are called arguments, the real values. And we'll do a 1 and a 4. And let's save this, run the code, and we can see that 5 has been logged to the console. And now let's write the other kind, the boomer way to write functions, which I never do, so I might actually screw this one up. We'll say function func2 and this is considered a side effect. I'm not returning a value. I'm just going to take this parameter and log it to the console. So now I don't have the console log from outside the function. I'll just call it. And we'll say hello from the global namespace. And let's run it again. And we can see that my string has been logged. So now that we've covered the big three of reference types, let's briefly go over the difference between reference types and primitive types. The key difference is that primitive types are immutable, while reference types are mutable. The easiest way to understand this is by looking at code. So let's make some primitive types. We'll say let a equal 10, and we'll say let b equal a. And then if we add some log statements right here, we should be able to see these values, and I would expect they're both 10. And as you can see, they are indeed both 10. So now what happens if I reassign the value of a? We'll say that now a equals Bob. And we'll verify that those changes have happened. And you can see A does now equal Bob. So what do you think has happened to B? Do you think that B, oh, wow, let's change that quick. Do you think B has now changed his value and is now Bob? Let's see what happens. No, you can see that B is in fact still 10. And that's because each primitive type has its own spot in memory and is immutable. And that means that we can only replace the entire value that is in that spot in memory, and we can't alter it. Look at C. I made a string which can be accessed by index, just like an array, and I tried to change C to D. But if I console.log it, you can see that C still equals ABC because it is immutable. So let's look at this illustration. You can see at the top there are the primitive types there, and each one has its own space in memory. Now below I have 3 objects, so those are each reference types, and as you can see, all of them are pointing to one spot in memory. And let's look at a code illustration to see what that means for your programs. So here we have a reference type, an object. Now you might want to say, well, let's just make another one and we'll give it a different name, and then we'll have 2 unique objects. So let's say let dev2 equal dev1. And now I'll log both of these. So I added the log statements, and you can see that they are both Martin, age 36. Now let's change the name. Let's say dev2 dot name equals Jonathan. And let's just add a log statement. Run our script again. Oh, and it's like, oh, great, excellent. So there's Jonathan. But now here's the thing. Because both of them are referencing the same spot in memory, let's also log dev1. And run it again. And you can see now dev1 also has the name of Jonathan. You now know what reference types are and the difference between immutable and mutable. Armed with this knowledge, you are ready to nail that interview and get that 6-figure job. Good luck.